Hey everyone, and I'd like to welcome you to today's webcast where I, along with my very esteemed colleagues from Oracle, will be discussing how Oracle Solutions and Apps Associates accelerators have been helping companies make their supply chains not just efficient, but incredibly effective as well. We'll be showcasing how Oracle is staying ahead of the pack to address the ongoing changes in the business climate that we're living in, as well as how Apps Associates has provided value for our customers with various accelerators to these supply chain solutions and some small extensions to these solutions, and really concentrating on bringing that digital thread to bear. My name is Andy Brisley. I am the Senior Business Advisory Director for Value Chain and Manufacturing for Apps Associates. I've been involved in supply chain as a practitioner and technology for the past 40 years. I am in all ways a supply chain geek. I have worked in multiple industries from high tech, automotive, industrial manufacturing, consumer packaged goods, as well as a few others. Joining me today will be Matt Angelovell and Michael Schlichting from Oracle. Matt is currently a principal sales engineer with Oracle, specializing in supply chain. And he also has an extensive history of supply chain management roles, including supply chain strategy and design, analytics, and logistics, and has also worked in consumer goods as well as some of the manufacturing verticals as well. Mike is a supply chain solutions engineer with Oracle, concentrating on the planning and supply chain execution. And he brings to us today a long history of supply chain and operations management roles in consumer goods and manufacturing. And also joining us is Ken Baker, who is the Apps Associates Oracle Alliance Director, and he will be handling the Q&A at the end. The agenda for today is as follows. I'll be providing a brief overview of Apps Associates, and then I'm going to hand it off to Matt, where he'll be discussing how companies will be able to make their supply chains not just efficient, but again, concentrating on that effectiveness to the organization as well by uptaking a move towards a cognitive command center. Matt will then hand it off to Mike to discuss the art of the possible with that command center, and I'll wrap things up with showcasing some of the Apps Associate accelerators for supply chain. Now, just some basic housekeeping rules. All of your microphones have been placed on mute. So please enter your questions into the chat session where we'll be monitoring them, and with the time remaining, we'll respond to the questions online if there's time, and if we don't have the time, we'll be responding to you directly. So a brief overview of Apps Associates. Apps Associates has been around for 20 plus years. We're a full service, mid-tier provider covering the full spectrum of digital transformation services from advisory, global design, change management, etc., into the digital functional solutions from EBS, ERP Cloud, SCM Cloud, etc. We also have an incredibly large and award-winning managed service practices. We do have a strong record of success in helping the digital transformations of industrial manufacturing clients with a strong focus in the value chain related applications from PLM, planning, execution, and service. And we also sit on the Supply Chain Management Advisory Council with Oracle. We're very proud of the work that we've done with Oracle and helping bring new products to bear. And we're also very proud of the fact that we have a 92% customer satisfaction rating, and really like to bring our deep and very seasoned bench to bear with all of these talented individuals. Now, having said that, our commercial for Apps Associate is done. So I'd like to turn it over to Matt today.
Great. Thank you very much, Andy, for that introduction. And good morning, or good morning if you're on the West Coast, or good afternoon, everyone else. My name is Matt Angelovell, and as Andy said, I'm a principal sales consultant in the supply chain planning, but I also bring at Oracle, but I also bring a lot of industry experience. So I've been where you guys are, I've been in your shoes. So this is more of some of my experiences that I'm talking to today with you guys. So So before we start, I just want to say that this is more of a safe harbor. This is something that the this presentation is some of this is part of a roadmap. So it's not exactly all fleshed out. It's not out there already. It's more of a ongoing work that we are undertaking within product strategy at Oracle. So, having said that, disruption as a way of life. Years ago, I remember when there was an earthquake off the coast in the Gulf of Japan, I think it was, and we had this when I was working for a very large CPG company, and there was this one trace ingredient that we had that that we only could source it to a sole source from Japan. And I remember as soon as we found out about the earthquake, I remember we had set up a whole, because it was sole sourced, because there was a heavy risk associated with it. We went into full, we got to figure out, how much safety stock we have. We had to look at our production schedule. We had to look at everything to make sure that how long can we make the product without having any, disruptions. And then, as everyone knows, since then, of course, we know COVID happened. And then along with COVID, since then, I would say disruption is a way of life now. It's the new norm. And even as recently as last week, I had two customers I was talking to who were sharing with me about, okay, the tariffs are coming in. What do I need to do to, tweak my forecast? What do I need to do to make sure that, that I'm not going to, end up paying a much bigger amount of money for the products that's coming in, things like that. So we're always on this. This is a ongoing thing that disruption is going to be a way of life for us. So how are we navigating uncertainty rather? We're investing in capabilities that enable deeper and wider end-to-end visibility. And when I say that, I think I'm going to park on this a little bit here, because my colleague Michael and we're going to be talking about the wider end-to-end visibility. So we're going to be talking about supply chain command center. But in addition to that, we have apps. That's Andy and Ken are going to be talking more about some of the tools that they have developed in-house that will greatly help you with this, with the capabilities that you have to enable a deeper and wider end-to-end visibility within your organization. So, and again, all these are things that we've heard. AI, ML, it's the buzzword. It's the latest buzzword. We'll talk more about looking at inventory optimization, supply chain networks. A lot of these things are things that I don't have to go into great detail to explain to you. All right. So what are companies asking? That I'm going to skip that, because that's what our leadership is asking us. What are we doing? And all these questions. But the challenges we have with that are below that. And I'm assuming that I don't have full visibility on who is there on this webinar, attending the webinar, but primarily it is the ability to gather data. Can we just look at exceptions and do it based on that? Can I get exceptions in real time? And overall, being able to understand what is at stake here, that's something that we all look at. And then we have three things that we need to look at. One is detect where things are, going off, and then decide what we will do about what we found out. And then finally, we execute against that. And, sometimes these things, go into, that's part of the reason why we have, or what we're trying to talk about is the supply chain command center. And I think I always say this because I give away my age, even though I don't explicitly say that on these webinars. But back in the 90s, there was a concept called control towers. And many of you may be aware of it. I worked with one very well-known vendor on that one when I was working in industry and tried to build a control tower. Control towers were primarily intended for, to know logistics. Hey, where's my product? Did my product get to my customer? Or is it en route from the supplier with the raw material and things like that? However, control towers have a huge difference with command centers. Control towers were sometimes automated, but command centers are more fully automated or mostly automated. Was fairly siloed. The what you saw in control towers. Hey, this is what the logistics piece is doing. But in command center, everything is much more integrated across, again, end-to-end visibility. It required additional setups to generate results, but in command centers, that was for control towers, but for command centers, it allows for efficient cross-functional processes. So if you're looking at a demand at risk, you can look from one end to all the way to the other end. The big one is that there were no predefined use cases for control tower. It just gave you, hey, it just gave you a snapshot where things are. Command centers instead are focused on very specific use cases that are of interest or of importance to you. So it's not about, hey, here's a command center. Can I plug it in tomorrow? No, you have to build a command center based on what you want to see. And that's very, very important. So what is a command center? Command center is a combination of existing and new technologies combined with near real-time data from the business ecosystem. It facilitates advanced data processing and allows for the delivery of use case specific, insightful information, predictions and suggestions that are relevant and adaptive to user experiences based on more connected supply chain data. So you will see Michael give you a rundown of what our command center looks like. But one of the things that we're looking for is looking at these are some of the key features of the command center, the Oracle's. So again, as I mentioned, predefined use cases, quick response with advanced analytics, and pre-built continuous improvement. But I want to focus a little bit on consumable internal and external data. So when I say internal data, it does not have to be an Oracle shop all the way to get a supply chain command center to work. We can mix and match with other solutions. So you may have a different solution for WMS or TMS, and you can incorporate that into the Oracle supply chain command center. Also, we'll talk a little bit more about external data. And there are a lot of different external data points that we use. For one, there's a system called or an app called Everstream. And Everstream is looking constantly across the globe and identifying things that can affect someone's supply chain. So, for example, if it probably would have flagged, the day yesterday when the tariffs came into. And that way it would tell you, hey, here's a signal that tells me that there is something that happens and how it can possibly affect your supply chain. Another one is GenCast, which is Google's new weather app, supposedly the most accurate one out there today. It can really help you find out exactly how the weather is going to look over the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks out, and know what you need to do and things like that. So at Oracle, we're taking it a step further. So we talked earlier about detect, decide, and execute. So what we want to be able to do is just like how there's a part of the brain called the hippocampus that takes in information, and then based on that body of work or things that it then applies, hey, goes and looks for certain, data points to see where things are. And then finally comes back and says, okay, based on all this information, I decide what I'm going to do with it. So the cognitive command center will go out, detect these pieces of information, and then come back and analyze the data. So when you're looking at it, it's giving you all the options and saying, these are some of the options out there, and these are the things, these are some of the recommendations. And there are probably trade-offs. These are some things that can be done, cannot be done. It's all based on machine learning. So the whole idea of the hippocampus and everything is just simulating a brain and the ability of a brain to be able to look and figure out what decisions need to be made. And here are some of the cognitive command center use cases that we have. One of the things we just talked about is monitoring and mitigation. So, hey, here's something that is at risk. What am I going to do about that thing that is at risk? And one of these is demand at risk. Another one is like manufacturing execution constraints. And at the same time, so that's more of a reactive nature. At the same time, there's something you can do also even from a proactive nature with supply chain command center. So you can look and see, hey, how is my inventory across my network? How is it looking? Is it looking at certain locations, certain nodes having higher inventory than the demand signals at that? Should I move the product from there to another location where there is more of a demand signal? And if there's less, is there some places where there's obsolescence that we need to look at? Most of the times, and you probably know this very well, is that you tend to look at for things like obsolescence or excess inventory is when you get a report, or sometimes it's at the quarter. Somebody does a final inventory count and then says, you look, these are the products that are not moving. How about if we had a more real-time snapshot of where things are in terms of inventory? You can then use that, or depending on where things are, be able to optimize them. With the demand at risk, that is, I believe, the one that Michael will be showing to you also. So here's the framework for the command center. So what you do is you have all these data sources, as I mentioned. There's a third-party data too, meaning there are other solutions out there. And what you can do is we have a analytics product called Fusion Data Intelligence, FDI. You bring all this into FDI. You do transformations. You cleanse the data. You prepare them, and then you apply the learning algorithm to that data. So there are different machine learning algorithms. Based on that, it'll come back and give you a training model, meaning that model is trained to look for certain pieces of information. And then based on that, you build your cognitive command center. And every time it'll come back and give you recommendations based on that. So every time you go through this, the more the data you have, the more mature that model, the training model will look. So the more information it has. So in fact, when we build these training models, we say up front, you probably need at least 3 years worth of data to get a full, really good idea of where, have a full gambit of, different situations that you encounter in your supply chain. So this is how it looks like. So you got the black swan signal. Black swan is anything that is an unexpected, or a surprise event. And these are the ones in black are the black swan events, finished good shipment delay, late shipment, production resource. So what it'll do is it'll take that and then pull all those pieces of information, come back and say, hey, what's out there in terms of, is there a raw material that's affected because of the weather? Is there a finished good shipment delay because of the weather? Is there a production resource overload because of the weather? So you can see that it's not just one event itself. It could be a bunch of couple of events or more than that causes a black swan to happen. And what it does is it looks at all the information in there and pulls all these things and come back and say, you know what, these are the things. It comes back and tells you to mitigate that risk. Here are the recommendations. And then it'll come back and give you, here are some of the options in terms of recommendations and what are the trade-offs of these recommendations. I hope this is making sense. Similarly, you would do something what I would call a manufacturing execution constraint. So this is more internal. Even last year, I had a huge, a big manufacturer, furniture manufacturer up in Minnesota that was shutting down one of their plants because of inclement weather, and they wanted to be able to move that whole production run to another plant elsewhere. And so this is something that happens fairly regularly, even in this country. And so you're able to take all these different and then be able to look at the risk monitoring algorithms and again come up with the appropriate recommendations for that. So when it comes to optimization, inventory optimization, again, it looks at all the signals, internal signals. So supply chain planning. Is there a demand signal for it? Is there orders against it from customers? What is the product life cycle? Is there a new product being added in here? How is the warehouse looking? Is the warehouse, is it at optimal 80%, 85%, or is it overloaded? How is the transportation to move that product? So as much as some of this, it gives you these inputs, those inputs, after that, it goes through the optimization algorithm and then comes back and spits out recommendations that go for how should you manage the warehouse, how should you manage your transportation, and what about your procurement? How do you do those things, purchasing lead times and things like that. So again, this is something that we can, we're looking to do as part of this exercise, is being able to do these through the Cognitive Command Center. So that, in a nutshell, is what I had. And I know we have time later on to take questions, but if there's anything in the chat, I'll be happy to answer it. And having said that, I'm going to pass it on to my colleague, Michael here.
All right. Thanks, Matt. Get my screen up here. You can see that and hear me, I hope.
Yeah, I was just going to say real quick, too, if you have any questions, just put them in the Q&A or the chat, and we'll answer them at the end.
Sounds good. Yeah, thanks, Matt. Yeah, we'll be taking a look at a use case for demand at risk and how we solve for that. And so Andy said it at the beginning. My name is Michael Schlichting, and I'm a supply chain solution engineer at Oracle. Prior to that, I worked in consumer packaged goods, distribution, manufacturing, and a variety of supply chain management roles that cover procurement, manufacturing, logistics, supply chain finance, and analytics. So now at Oracle, what I do here, I love helping supply chain leaders realize their own visions and modernizing their operations. And today, what we're going to do is we'll take a journey through a late inbound shipment scenario where we're going to investigate a proactive alert for demand at risk by using the supply chain analytics platform that Matt talked about. We'll dive into the details, investigate the root cause of a late inbound shipment that contains some critical raw materials. We'll analyze our increased exposure to revenue loss due to this in our sales order backlog. And from there, we'll consider options on how we can reprioritize orders and minimize our backlog while maximizing revenue. And finally, we'll review metrics to ensure that we've minimized our risk of revenue loss at the end. So we'll start by logging into the system, and this is where we see all of our supply chain applications, that we have access to based on our system credentials. And first, where we're going to start is that command center using the application or the analytics application. And the command center dashboard gives us valuable insight into the entire supply chain. And while we're here, what we're looking for is low-hanging fruit. So naturally, we're going to look for the color red. And we see that in the demand at risk performance indicator at the top. And now this metric represents a projection of future lost sales due to problems within our supply chain. And of course, we see a visualization of the demand at risk on the map below. And, we can use that. We can review how the orders are distributed across different countries or regions. Now, in this example, our Canadian distribution region has the largest percentage of demand at risk, with about 23% of the 791,000 total. So our immediate action is to evaluate which demands actually are at risk and how, look at how we maybe want to resolve them. And to do this, we'll drill in right from here, drill in for some details. Now, after drilling, the metrics at the top of the dashboard compare the demand at risk for our current plan of record on the left against our current projections based on actual events happening within the supply chain on the right. And what we see is that our prior demand at risk of $566,000 has increased to $791,000, which is over our target threshold of $600,000. Now, the event-based scenario on the right is a projection based on actual events that were captured in the system since that plan of record was created. Now, examples of this could include maybe an updated arrival time for an in-transit shipment, a new inventory receipt, a revised work order completion, or maybe even a new customer order. Now, in the tables at the bottom of the screen, we see how demand at risk is broken out over the next 4 months. And the red tells us that there's a high number of exceptions in the current month that are possibly representing either projected late sales orders, late forecasts, or inventory stockouts. Now, we have $189,000 of revenue at risk in the current month of September. And from here, we'll drill right into those details behind that demand at risk for the current month. Now, after drilling, we see the $189,000 in the current month is actually all for the same finished good product. It's our 7000 series network switch. And next, we want to identify the root cause. So from here, we'll drill right into the exception details behind that. So drilling in here, we see that much of the late demand is actually related to insufficient raw material lead time, similar to the example that Matt was talking about with an earthquake before. Now, this accounts for 60 total customer orders, or 78% of the total risk in filling those orders for the 7000 series network switch in our current month. And what we'll want to do is get a closer look at the related shipments by drilling into their details right from here. Now, after drilling, you'll notice that we're on a different screen, and we're actually looking at the shipments within transportation. We see that some air shipments that were planned to arrive at the Burlington, Massachusetts production facility, there were some air shipments planning to arrive, and we happen to know that they are component parts shipping from a warehouse in Los Angeles, California. Now, on the left, we can actually check on the latest tracking events for this air shipment while seeing the shipment visualized on the map to the right. And while we click in and look at those tracking events, we actually see that the air shipment that we're looking at is actually marked as delayed for weather or natural disaster. Could be that earthquake Matt was talking about earlier. Well, we know this could be a very significant short-term event, and it'll certainly impact our ability to meet customer demand. Now, we might check inventory at other local warehouses, but for the sake of time, let's assume that we've already done that and it's not an option. We also know that expediting is not an option, as this is already a critical parts shipment that was due to arrive by air. Now, this confirms to us that we have a backorder situation on our customer orders of that 7000 series switch because of this weather and natural disaster event. So returning back to our dashboard, we need to look at some other options. And what we'll want to do is review our open sales orders for that item and attempt to resolve those exceptions maybe in a different way. So to do this, we'll drill directly into our backlog management, our backlog management application. And here in the backlog management application, we see the backlog analytics dashboard actually shows us the fulfillment metrics for all of our open sales orders. However, right now we just want to run a scenario to see if we have any other options to better serve our customers. And to do this, we will open the backlog analysis workbench. Here in the workbench, what we want to start with is searching for all the open sales orders for that 7000 series switch that we're trying to improve. And once we do that, the backlog workbench shows us all of the unshipped sales orders for this item. Now, this workbench allows us to choose different demand priority rules to run simulations and determine the best allocation of our current supply. Now, our current backlog plan that we're looking at prioritizes our sales orders first by the requested date and then by revenue. So orders with the earlier request dates are being filled on time, but orders with a later requested date are actually being delayed. Now, we see that some of those delayed orders that are highlighted here are actually high revenue and for important and profitable customers, First Union and Business World. Now, these two orders that I've highlighted, they represent $32,000 in late revenue. So we want to look at running a simulation to focus on prioritizing our high revenue orders and satisfying our largest customer orders first. So what we'll do is we'll select a predefined rule that first prioritizes by revenue before considering that requested date. What we're trying to do is target to minimize the financial impact of this supply disruption. So we'll run the plan to launch the new simulation. All right. So the backlog engine begins reprioritizing all the sales orders and then repromising that supply based on the constraints we have using the demand priority rules. And once it's completed, we'll be able to see the updated plan results. Okay, now we see what happens when we reprioritize. So what we're doing is we're satisfying our larger and possibly more profitable customer orders on time and letting the smaller orders be delayed. From here, we might choose to accept the simulation and execute against this fulfillment plan, but we also, we could consider more simulations and run them from here if we like. But for today, let's assume that we're satisfied with this plan. And what we can do is release the planning results. It'll automatically update all the scheduled ship dates on the sales orders. And an important note here is that we as a planner, supply chain analyst, we're in complete control of this backlog in the sandbox here. It's always going to remain a scenario until we specifically select to release it, keeping us in control of the whole situation. So now we want to return to where our journey began. We're going to look at the new backlog optimized plan right alongside with that event-based plan and the original plan of record that we had. And we see that we still have some risk, but it is below our threshold and we're ready to execute the plan moving forward. Now recall that our previous demand at risk was $791,000. And now we see that it's down to $587,000 based on our backlog simulation we just ran. Now, this is what's possible with a command center. This is one use case, but this is what's possible with a command center in a unified supply chain cloud platform. And, of course, the platform, as Matt alluded to earlier, it's embedded with artificial intelligence and machine learning to link people, process, and data within a connected digital thread. So to recap what we showed in this journey today, of course, we started by noticing an alert regarding our ability to satisfy customer orders within the supply chain analytics platform. We drilled into the root cause of a late inbound air shipment containing critical parts causing customer back orders. We understood our increased exposure to revenue loss from the sales order backlog. We then evaluated the reprioritization options to minimize our expected order backlog while maximizing revenue. And we ended the journey when we understood that we have minimized our risk of lost revenue within the supply chain analytics platform. So with that, I believe I'm passing it back over to Andy.
Andy, you might be on mute too.
I am. Can you hear me? And are you seeing my screen?
Yes.
All right. So what I'll be talking about now is just the various accelerators that we've developed for with Apps Associates based off of the tools. Now, all of these accelerators are available immediately. So, and again, I think what you'll see, we have many different accelerators for supply chain related activities, and I'm going to be diving into the top three. The attribute-based planning for make-to-order, Kanban, inline supplier risk, and the production scheduling toolkit. But I did want to point out that we also have an EPM optimization tool that is geared specifically for and utilizes supply chain data where you have a supply-constrained operation and you want to make sure you're getting the most profitability out of the actual supply that you're utilizing. We have a dynamic pricing tools that allows companies to do very, very cool calculations based off the cost, market segments, and other factors. And lastly, I did just want to point out, coming very soon is our Smart Operations Toolkit accelerator, along with something we're very excited about is the Agile to Cloud PLM Toolkit. So, and as we start to look into these accelerators, again, I think what you'll see throughout the course of these discussions is just that whole enabling of that digital thread. They talked about it. Matt and Mike talked about it coming up. And what we've done is we've taken the ability to take that information that is part of the unified data model, and we're pushing it down to the different nodes that need it and utilizing a lot of the functionality. All of these accelerators are protected against upgrades, so every quarter you don't have to go in and do a bunch of regression testing, etc. So why don't we just go ahead and very quickly look at our attribute-based planning model. So, attribute-based planning or make-to-order has had many challenges throughout the years and has been problematic for customers for a multitude of reasons. If we start with the premise that planning is all about getting the right part to the right place at the right time at the lowest possible cost, but what companies typically end up finding is that all of this information exists in different silos. Everybody has their own little spreadsheet and multiple phone calls and meetings, and honestly, each area has their own planning needs and expects different outcomes. And so all of that is because at times the
Hey, Andy?
Yes.
Excuse me. I'm sorry to interrupt. They're not being able to see your slides. Do you want to stop sharing and then come back in and see if that'll help?
Right, yeah, thanks. Let me see here. Are we seeing the slides now?
I can see one with the title Apps Associates Made to Order Accelerator Solution.
Yes. Okay.
The
So
5
that's
bullet
where I'm
point.
gonna go.
5. Yeah,
Yep.
that's what I'm seeing now.
All right, guys. So basically, again, we talked about the different problems that people have, et cetera, and some of the issues along with the back-to-back order processing didn't actually meet the actual unique functionalities required. So what we've come up with is the accelerator that basically utilizes the various flex fields that we have, right? And so we're using the flex fields in manufacturing, bombs, items, routings, et cetera, and we're passing that off through web services, et cetera. We've also created a unique supply chain orchestration flow to create the downstream reservations and the plannings. And we're pushing all of these various attributes that companies want to use, whether it be size, color, product type. And in a particular case that we're talking about, it had to do with building pallets in a very, very large staging area because this particular customer had a unique need and a very, very large products. And so when the released work orders were created, we wanted to make sure that all the attributes were passing down to the unique the documentations with the proper attributes so the people can see them and operate off them effectively. And again, we just continue to push this information, continue to expand that digital thread. So if we look at, hopefully you're seeing the slide with the process flow. If you look at it from a little bit of a reverse flow, so we take the order in this manufacturing or in the distribution facility, and when this order is taken, there's rules that basically stripe the order based off customer, product types, business areas, and we've defined these rules to automatically stripe these orders. So when the back-to-back orders are created, they'll be automatically striped with the transfer orders, etc. We'll do the planning, collections, etc. And this information then gets propagated down to the different manufacturing facilities. And based off of different manufacturing rules and how things are being utilized and the expectation of the different clients, we've been able to say, where does that propagation start? Where does it end? So if there's a supplier and a contract manufacturer that those attributes need to get passed to, we pass that information all the way through. So going on, I'm just going to go through some quick screenshots here of, again, this is after we've created that custom workflow or that custom sales order orchestration flow. We get this, and this information is now being passed down to the actual transfer order. And again, here's the shipper. What installation line is it being passed down to as well? And in the next, now we're looking at the attributes in planning. So we're looking at it from the transfer orders. What is the order type? What is the work order object, the order number? And again, here's the shipper numbers, some base attributes that we're working off of, and who the planner is. And then when we go in to release that information, when we in the planner's workbench, we can see that shipper information, the packaging configuration, etc., is still being transferred all the way through down into the actual work order itself with the shipment. So from a distribution or from a dispatcher workbench, we can do the sorts, we can do the searching in various areas to, again, schedule and plan the different work areas with the proper attribution that's required. And lastly, we'll just kind of show what the actual traveler would look like. So, when I'm talking about the value that this is brought to this particular customer, and it really gets down to elimination of meetings, elimination of phone calls, starting to eliminate a lot of those separate spreadsheets. And the master data is a side benefit of this, as we're noticing the master data is starting to improve because customers are starting to trust this solution. So whether you're working in, Kanban flows, or whether you're working in discrete work order batches, this is all going to be passed down to the Kanban, the work orders, the travelers, etc., and allows the companies the effectiveness or the flexibility to plan in the way they want to, be at the departmental level, and has given them not just the gains in efficiency, but also has allowed them incredible flexibility and has improved their effectiveness. In one of our cases, this customer has a 5-day shipment lead time. And if you can imagine that, and it's a very make-to-order product, so the processes that they have to go through and the times that they've saved has really allowed them to increase their commitments to their customers. So the next area that I'd like to talk about is Kanbans, and we've kind of taken it a little step further. So most people are familiar with Kanbans as a replenishment strategy, but many of our clients, this was we've developed this prior to 25A, and Fusion didn't really have a Kanban solution per se. And many of our clients today are lean manufacturers and have this replenishment needs, but we took it this extra step because we wanted to extend that information, that digital thread, all the way down through. And what they were really concerned about is making sure that they're managing just the Kanban violations, but passing this and doing it off of various characteristics of the supplier risk assessment. So we're taking this information, we're doing the replenishment, but we're also putting that data into the actual Kanbans themselves and the planning tools. And so they really wanted to have the challenge of, they wanted to have the dynamic sizing, they wanted to see these various notifications going around. So we started with the actual Power solution that's in Oracle. So it's standard Oracle functionality. We also created a unique program for our sizing based off the customer needs. So if the customer has separate Kanban sizing calculations, we have the flexibility to consume that. And so we've mapped the items, this information, into the item master flex fields, so that if people are searching off of items, or they wanted to do specific item searches and see what the supplier risk, or search off different Kanban notifications, etc., they can see that information. And we created some custom exceptions as well, and the data is passed into the planner's workbench. So as we go along and as we see this, the day-to-day execution, if you're familiar with supply chain execution, right, this top line is pretty self-explanatory. But now what we've done is we've taken a tactical planning look at the long-term supplier risk and using that Kanban quantities as input into that. So giving you an example of what that is looking like for this, we're just have some Kanban cards here, and we're using the flex fields on the Kanbans. And now we're passing this. This is where we are passing this daily quantity, and we've given them a purchase item risk category. This is obviously configurable. The framework allows it to be whatever you want it to be. But in this case, we just did high, medium, or low, or leave null. And then taking that to the next step, now they're imported through just web services. They're imported into the supply planning workbench and for information and functionality. So as I'm looking at this tactical plan, I can see what my item risk is, and do I have a daily quantity? Am I shooting it? Am I going over it, etc.? So again, looking at just adding this functionality to the planner's workbench has allowed these planners to remove some of the spreadsheets that they were keeping for the Kanbans and some of the items that they're using at high risk. They still wanted that capability of Kanbans, but they were losing some of that longer term visibility. So we've also imported that and created different purchase categories looking at the time. But you can see the conditional formatting way over on the right and up on the left. Where are those Kanban violations? So using the standard functionality of ASCP, we can use these conditional categorization and formatting and see this in the planner's workbench. And even looking out further, where are the Kanban violations? So do I have a violation? Do I have a medium risk? And so, again, it allows the planners the ability to look at various scenarios, if you will, and make the adjustments and see where the criticality lies on either high risk or medium risk items, and color coding that just help bring this information to bear. So as Mike was saying, you want to just kind of operate off of the exceptions. So making sure that we identify these exceptions. And again, we ended up using the standard functionality to create, custom exception set for the Kanban size violations. So the planner has all of this information at their hands, using Kanban functionality, making a part of a bigger process, and again, extending that digital thread into different parts of the organization that at times have been difficult to accept, and continuing to push that information through to them. So the value that they have seen from this, so again, without 25A, we provided them immediate Kanban processing. We're able to give them those Kanban calculations that were unique to them, that were very, very business driven, being able to identify different color coding for different Kanban cards were some of their challenges. But I think most importantly, we've extended that digital thread of the Kanban to make sure that all of that this information, to make sure that that information is available to the planners at the right time, and has eliminated multiple spreadsheets, multiple phone calls, and just, again, managing these things by exceptions is very, very important. And the improvements that they're seeing again here, we're removing the multiple spreadsheets, the different silos of data. The Kanban master data, if you will, is becoming better and better and better. So overall, again, we're not just making things more efficient for the planners and the supply chain execution, the floor and the replenishment cycles, but we're making it much more effective and very focused on how they want to see things. Now, the last thing that I'll be talking about, and sorry for flying through this, but we do have a production scheduling toolkit that we're actually very proud of. And some of the clients' challenges and that we've seen running into multiple production scheduling implementations, each enterprise is unique and they want to have their own challenges and they want to continue to enhance that which has made them competitive, made them a differentiator in the marketplace. And so we've identified a common set of extensions, whether it be external data requirements, the model or the solver enhancements and configurations, and we're making that available in a toolkit. So we're bringing these to production scheduling implementations. And so some of these things were the model solver tweaks, the lack of internal data. And so what we've done is we provided a cleaner UI than what was standard initially. And it's Apex based, but the fact of the matter is it will be Redwood. We'll be transferring it to Redwood as well. This was done before the Redwood transition. And we allowed multiple configuration options to be exposed to different scheduling challenges. That is allowing the teams that have these super users that are aware of the business function and the scheduling challenge to utilize and make these changes by themselves. We're also allowing and extending that digital thread by allowing them to consume flex field data and other outside data sources. And we also came up with a production scheduling data warehouse. And so if you take a look at it, this is what the current user experience looks like. Whether you be looking at the administrator, the scheduler, etc. And what I'm going to do in the interest of time is just trying to get through some of the scheduling and the setup-based data to show you some of the flexibilities that we have exposed to the teams. Again, we're exposing the different flex field data, some of the different attribute-based data that you heard about in the attribute-based forecasting or accelerator that we had, the different customer codes, and whether they're from item and work order attributes. So again, we are also exposing multiple external data sources. So if you have a PLM system or you have a CX system that you are passing down configuration items or sales issues or priorities, etc., we can consume that data as well and take that into consideration. It's been very powerful. We also have, again, and this is when we're talking about being able to do the overrides. And so we start with time-based overrides and being able to make sure that this information, again, is looking at the enterprise and changeable, whether it's a temporary relationship between a step to down to the resource to resource, whether you have start with delays, etc. We're now exposing that to make sure that the scheduling guys are able to utilize these different tools. And just as a quick, graphic to see what is, an illustrative approach to what is the interpretation of these different precedent constraints, whether it's X precedes Y, Y is preceded by X, etc. So you can look at the meets with, stands for inverse, overlaps, is overlapped by, etc. During contains a lot of different functionality that is available to meet those very, very detailed scheduling requirements. We also are exposing some work order overrides. And so whether you want to look at descriptions, start dates, and if, again, the description is kind of one of those AI things that we see being able to be utilized, what in that can we utilize to move forward with? So, and again, getting down to the resource level. So the value that people are seeing in these things is, again, extending the digital thread, the user improvement, the adoption has increased greatly. And the toolkit approach has allowed us to reduce implementation timelines. So having said that, again, here is a link to our different accelerators. So to learn more from any of this, and these solutions will be coming out to all you, this deck will be sent to all of you. We'll have our emails on here. And also to wrap up, Apps Associates is offering, a free consultation to anybody that wants to talk through any of the things that we've talked about. And some of the things that you'll gain is, the personalized insight to your supply chain challenges, giving you some strategy suggestions and looking at different accelerators. So, our last commercial, over 20 years of experience, and we do a lot of configurations and customizations to make you effective, to make you unique and standing out in your industry. So with that, I'm sorry that we ran a little bit long and weren't able to take questions. Were there any other questions, Ken?
Yeah, I just had, there was a reference to earlier about unverified data. Can you just clarify that was? And I have one other question besides that.
Where is that other question? I don't see the question. Can you explain the question a little bit more?
Well, I think the question is, there was a reference to unverified data around the command center. Is there any clarification around that? Yeah, further clarification.
Michael, Matt?
Unverified data. Michael, did you talk about that?
No, I think it might have been at the end of yours, Matt. You were talking about, bringing different data sources in.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we can bring in third-party data sources into the command center. So we're not limited to just Oracle products.
Okay.
Did that answer the question? I don't know.
Yeah, I think so. And then the other question that was asked is in reference to the command center, does it come out of the box? And if not, kind of what's involved in configuration, just kind of a high level, kind of how to get it up and running.
So the command center, the FDI, the Fusion Data Intelligence will have all the connectors to the different data sources. So depending on your own use case, you will have to configure that. So it's not depending on what, like I mentioned, it's all about what is your use case, and that's what we build against.
Everybody, I really appreciate your attendance today, and I look forward to any future conversations. Thanks, everybody.